Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Brackett. I'm the president of the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to the second in our series of webinars co-hosted by ourselves and NJM Insurance Group. We're always looking at the key issues of small businesses in these seminars, and we know there's no shortage of challenges for the small business community today. But today we're going to focus on something that is rather unique and growing rapidly. And that is how artificial intelligence is affecting business operations and really life in general. Our guests today are going to talk about the benefits, pitfalls, and implications of AI business strategies. And I think you'll find it very informative. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, please put those questions into our chat box, and we will try to get to some at the end of the presentation within the hour we have allocated. I want to thank NJM Insurance Group for continuing to partner with us. NJM is a great corporate partner of ours and a great corporate citizen of New Jersey, and we can't thank them enough for helping us put these webinars on as we've been doing for the last couple of years. With that, I'd like to introduce Kevin McMillan, Manager, Commercial Lines Policyholder Services at NJM Insurance Group. Kevin, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tom, and good morning, everyone. Thanks to everyone for being here this morning. I'm excited to hear our discussions on artificial intelligence from our three experts this morning. NJM is proud to sponsor this webinar series, spotlighting the issues surrounding small business in New Jersey. I want to thank the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity to briefly speak to you today. The Chamber has been, as you all know, an essential voice for small businesses in New Jersey and for over more than a century. And they've been a very strong advocate down in the corridors of the Capitol in Trenton. NJM has been helping small businesses in New Jersey for well over a century. And for most of that century, NJM has been providing workers' comp insurance and commercial auto insurances to these businesses. However, most recently, NJM has expanded their product line to become a single solution for businesses for all their business needs as far as insurance. We expanded our footprint at the same time. For most of that century, we've provided workers' comp and commercial auto to policyholders in New Jersey. However, we now are a regional insurer in New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Delaware, and Maryland. So we do have a large footprint to be able to accommodate our businesses in the Mid-Atlantic region. We now offer, as I said, we wrote two products for well over a century. We now offer what NJM titles a Pro Edge Business Policy, or BOP. This is a policy that provides liability and property insurance for small businesses. We also expanded our line for mid-size and larger businesses with the offering of a commercial package policy, which also again provides property and liability insurance for the mid to larger employees. NJM business policyholders receive the largest and highest levels of service, including access to our nationally recognized claims service and customer service, as well as our loss prevention services. Our focus at NJM is on safety with our customers. It's not just insuring that policy, it's being a partner with that business owner to point out hazards in the workplace and prevent things before they happen, as well as when their customers and employees are on the road driving, we are there to assist them as well with coverage needs and defensive driving tactics. We want to help our policies grow and in turn grow with them. If you're not an NJM business customer, I encourage you to visit njm.com or go to our website and you can reach out to me. My email address is kmcmillan@njm.com. I'd be glad to answer any of your questions. So this morning, I'd like to introduce three of our experts in the AI field, and I look forward to hearing our discussions and Q&A. The three gentlemen with us today are Douglas Vargo, Kevin Michels, and Shobhit Varshney. So gentlemen, thanks for being here this morning, and I look forward to our discussions. Rick, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. I'm Kevin Friedlander, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Communications and Events for the New Jersey Chamber, and I'll be moderating this discussion, which is a very hot topic. It's all over the news, and it seems like in the past 8 months, this topic of artificial intelligence has exploded. So let's give our panelists a few seconds to introduce themselves and talk just very briefly about their background. So why don't we start with you, Doug?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Doug Vargo. I'm part of CGI. I lead a group called Emerging Technologies practice here at CGI. And we're in charge of all of our data insights and analytics, artificial intelligence, all of areas around cloud adoption, transformation, business agility, intelligent automation. I bring that up because it's so important to remember, even throughout today's discussion, that as we talk about artificial intelligence, that's one piece of the puzzle when it comes to adopting digital and emerging technologies. It's really bringing all these technologies together to help transform your small business. So great to be with you. I look forward to today's discussion.
All right, now let's hear from Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you all for being here today. It's a real joy to be a part of this panel and think about these interesting issues. My name is Kevin Michels. I'm a professor over at the College of New Jersey, and I teach courses in ethics and innovation and law. And what's interesting about this subject, of course, is that it intersects all of those domains. I direct a center at TCNJ called the Center for Innovation and Ethics, and we think a lot about these types of questions. You know, what are the prospects for new technologies for making our world a better place? And at the same time, you know, what are the risks and downsides and concerns that need to be a part of our discussion about deploying these new tools and making sure that at the end of the day, they make our lives better. So it's a pleasure to be a part of the panel, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
All right, and last we hear from Shobhit. So let's hear from you.
Kevin, thanks for having us and thanks for hosting this event. I'm Shobhit Varshney. I'm a senior partner and VP in IBM Consulting. Our mission is to help large and small businesses leverage technologies to have outsized impact on their business. I'm accountable for all the AI, analytics, and IoT business for consulting in US, Canada, South America, across all the various industries that we serve, and go across the gamut of deep learning or unstructured content. There's a lot of computer vision work, contact center, anywhere that AI touches an end customer, where businesses are leveraging AI to be more productive or revenue generation. That's where my focus has been for the last 16 years.
Okay, perfect. And so as I mentioned, artificial intelligence is all over the news right now. As I was driving into Trenton today, CNBC, that's all they were talking about for a nice clip of time. So let's start with you, Shobhit. Why is all of a sudden AI blowing up now? I mean, it's been talked about for years. Companies, I worked previously at Wells Fargo. We were implementing it for many years. Why now? Why is it all of a sudden sort of like going mainstream?
It's a very good question. And just to level set, AI was a whole spectrum. We started with advanced analytics, then machine learning, then deep learning, and now we're in this foundation model generative AI space. So throughout the last few decades, we've had a few inflection points where all of a sudden we find an algorithm, some computing power, or something that changes the trajectory of that curve. That happened in 2017. We had a new way of building AI models that Google released. From that point on, that unleashed a new era of generative AI. So you're no longer telling the AI what rules to follow, what to look at. You are now in this phase where AI has pre-trained. It has already ingested the world's information. So you can think of it as a graduate intern that has multiple hats, that has degrees, and can now help you with different tasks, right? Historically, whenever we applied AI, we had to go create an AI model for each specific task. If you say, Shobhit, create an AI model that reads a contract and tells me what discount to apply, or here's a healthcare document, tell me if this insurance should be approved or not, or I need you to go create an email to personalize the message to a customer who just bought cookies from my store. For each of those models, we would have spent a lot of energy and time with data scientists required to go build each of those separate models. From that siloed AI, we have now switched over to one large model that can serve multiple use cases. And since it's already pre-trained, it has multiple degrees, it can get to time to value reduction significantly. So the big shift is the capability of AI has exponentially gone up in the last year. And when people like you and I started to use ChatGPT in November, all of a sudden we were exposed to the power of what these large language models can do. And in our heads, light bulbs started going off on where we can apply AI that is already pre-trained and ready to go. So you get to time to value faster. So that has been an exponential curve, and ChatGPT, as you guys know, reached 100 million users, fastest out of any application we've ever seen. So the demand is definitely there. The small businesses are being asked to do more with less, given all the impact on inflation, the supply chain issues, the shortage of labor. There's a lot of productivity pressure. And that intersection of AI finally getting to a point where we can deploy this quickly, rapidly at a low cost point, and all the pressures that they've been forced to do more with less, that intersection is what's causing this inflection point for us today.
Okay. And Doug, so large companies, small companies can now use AI. How are different companies implementing AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to Shobhit's comment, I think one of the big reasons why it's popping now, so it's so prevalent in our world today, is it's accessible to everyone. And just to the point that from a teenager in high school getting assistance on writing a paper to a small business being able to help that better business decision. ChatGPT, because of the large language models and the pre-trained models that Shobhit just talked about, that is one of the big reasons why we're seeing it in the headlines. We're seeing it everywhere we go, is the accessibility to everybody. Everyone can consume the generative AI or this intelligence. And one of the big reasons is where we are today is the compute power and the scalability power of those resources are unlike what we've ever seen. Through cloud computing, we're able to, number one, be able to produce this information in such a fashion. When you put in a query into ChatGPT, you're talking seconds of a return on something that's very, very custom and personalized to you. And the scale in which you can do that across a small business and an enterprise business is unprecedented.
So for those who aren't familiar, what's the difference between ChatGPT and Google, like using Google to find out information?
So this gets back to what Shobhit talked about, is the idea is this is a pre-trained algorithm model that has ingested all of the information across the internet itself. So when we search on something within the internet today, you're simply just getting a simple return based off of a question. With the generative AI, there is large language models that puts it in a perspective in which specifically who you are from a persona perspective, and provides you that information back to you in the area that is almost like chatting with a person. That is the biggest part of that. It's not just a blank, simple answer. It is a full understanding, a full transformational answer of what that question was. Shobhit, any additional information or perspective you'd like to provide there?
No, you're spot on. I think it's now becoming a co-pilot for your life. So earlier you would search for a question on an internet site and you would find a whole bunch of links, and then you would go click on each one of them, get the information, ingest that, understand what the steps are, and then you would form your opinion on the answer. So you're going from links and passages to an answer. That is like retrieving the answer from all this corpus of information. That's what this co-pilot is helping you. And it's contextual. It understands that if you're a lawyer, if you're a student, if you are trying to fix something, what persona should I put on? So again, going back to the multiple degrees that the graduate student has, it's because they understand how to read contracts or invoices or documentation, it can get to the answer, bring that answer to you instead of you having to go dig for the answer yourself. So that becomes a co-pilot that helps you accelerate. And hence that is a very different paradigm shift. And Google as well has their own Bard, which is the equivalent of ChatGPT. Microsoft has Bing, and then ChatGPT itself is a product that's available. So all the AI products are getting enhanced to a point where going away from just passage links and things of that nature to now getting to the actual answer. And then it has this generative capability that we didn't see before. So it's being able to generate an image, it's being able to generate a video or a text from all the information that it has been fed. So I can ask it to hyper-personalize things. I say, I'm writing an email to Kevin. Kevin loves to go biking. And it can create an image of somebody who's biking as part of the email. And then I can ask it to go generate an email as a response to what you sent me. It picks up the context. It can pick the right tone it needs to. It can pretend to be a particular persona and go create that content. That creation ability did not exist before. Now we're able to go back from retrieving links to actually creating the answer. And we have to be very careful when Bing and Googles of the world are providing the answer. They always used to give you where the answer is coming from. So as you see this paradigm shift of getting to an answer, you need to ensure that you have provenance, which means the links of where you got the answers from. Those still need to be included in the answer so we can trust that this is an accurate answer. You will see that with ChatGPT quite a bit at times where it is plausibly creating an answer that seems very accurate. So there's a lot of emphasis when we're applying these to enterprise use cases, small businesses. I need to know where you got the answer so I can trust that it is accurate. I just saw there was a question on the chat around accuracy of ChatGPT. I was hoping to answer that.
Yeah, so actually, Kevin, that's a good transition to your first question. Is AI reliable? And also, when people hear the word AI, there's a lot of positivity around it, but there's also some concern. So, and an ethical debate about it. What's all the issues surrounding concern and ethics? And at TC&J, what are you doing there to think about those type of things?
Yeah, well, like most other settings, I expect the conversations are quite frequent. I think I've been a part of 2 group extended committee or faculty sessions discussing its implications. Very few sectors are not affected by it. Higher ed, of course, has its own particularized challenges, but to speak to it generally, one of the concerns is very much related to what Shobhit identified, which is, some people have called it the hallucination problem, which might be strong language for some, right? But there is this genuine risk. In fact, one can be even more emphatic about it. If you look at ChatGPT's own disclaimers, it says up top, may provide false or incorrect information. I'm paraphrasing, and I'm sure I don't have the language right. But it is a concern. I think it's one they acknowledge right now, and it's a predictive tool, right? It's trying to predict an answer based on inferences from data, and that's a probabilistic exercise. And it can generate, and generation in part entails creating what does not entirely exist. It's not just sending us to links, but it's combining information to create answers that are particularized to your questions, as we've heard, which of course is what makes it so valuable. But I think it also does raise the stakes here in terms of it's very, again, to use Shobhit's language here, it's authoritative. It comes across with unqualified answers often that seem uncontestable in the sense that, hey, they're coming from this objective source. And the concern is that it has not exactly broken new ground here in terms of the quality of its footnoting, to put it gently, right? I mean, you don't get footnoted answers. You might ask it for follow-up sources, and it'll send you to links or it'll send you to other authorities. Sometimes those authorities I've had trouble tracking down. Some have told me that, well, it's not even clear that every authority it sends you to is accurate or perfectly maps on. So we've got challenges there in terms of verifying the accuracy of what we're getting. And that's a high stakes question because, the flip side is it's so easy to use and so powerful and so valuable in many ways that the temptation is to over rely. And that poses a huge array of challenges, I think, for companies, right? Do we want our employees, deferring to this device, or can we insist that they use it, but use it with their own discretion, their good judgment, they think critically about it? There's also the risk that when you over rely, you kind of dampen your own critical capacities, right? We've all been kind of become less, effective navigators of the world because of GPS. Is this a long-term threat to us? Are we going to defer to what we get from a device without engaging. I mean, the answers are good, but at some level they can be a bit pedestrian. They're a little bit plain vanilla, and we want deeper, more critical analysis to be layered on top of this. So it's a great tool to start with. The danger, of course, is that it's going to be the end game for many. Here's this great answer. Let's copy and paste it in and send it out. From an ethical point of view, I'll just highlight a couple of other concerns. The ethics/law/intellectual property questions. We worry about the data in. Of course, there's this longstanding challenge of all these AI models, not just the large language models, but the predecessor machine learning tools are all based on data, large data sets. And there's the obvious concern that bad data in, bad data out. So to the extent the data they rely on are biased, so too are the outputs. The intellectual property, privacy, confidentiality concerns, I'll just touch on them quickly here. But companies have to worry a little bit about what they put into that, the inquiry, because it's tempting to put in elaborate inquiries in excruciating detail, because the more particularized your question, the more particularized your answer, which is great value, except are companies at risk of putting information into these large language models that might be proprietary and confidential. There's also the question, and I'll leave it here because there's so many other things we want to explore. There's also the question, I think, in my mind, to what extent is the output something we can use from a legal point of view without potentially running the risk of bumping into somebody else's intellectual property, right? These tools are using what's out there on the web and scraping it to develop answers. There are interesting and very open questions now about to what extent it can and should be delivering outputs that may be coming too close to the other data they're relying on, right? So there are copyright issues there. It may be fair use to rely on the data to generate the answers, but the answers themselves may pose a whole new question to the extent they run afoul of copyright concerns. So companies have a lot to worry about, but it's also a profoundly powerful tool. So a lot to think about as we kind of, we're breaking new ground here as we go, legally, ethically, and every other way.
So Shobhit and Doug, Kevin raises a lot of good questions there. How are your companies, dealing with those questions, and when you're, and what advice do you have for business owners who are on this webinar right now to know that they're getting good data, or how they can implement AI right now successfully?
Doug, why don't you start first, now add on.
Sure, happy to. One of the areas that Kevin talked about, I just want to pick up on, is this fairness and biasness within AI. It's very interesting when you listen to the news or some of the publications. This is a big controversial topic, and I believe folks are just broad brushing it, and they're just saying, AI, there's a biasness, there's no fairness in AI, and so on. I think it's so important that we dissect that just a little bit, because you'll remember artificial intelligence is really an umbrella of a term. And as we start to dig into this a little bit deeper, one of the big basis of that is the algorithms in which are generated to derive those the artificial intelligence insights. Those algorithms that are generated are typically right now generated by a person. Eventually, they will be auto-generated by other algorithms themselves. So it'll just be a looping mechanism. But those algorithms can be developed in a biased nature. So depending on who is developing those, that is where biasness is injected. The other part of where biasness can be injected is the data in which is being fed to train the models. If you train that model in a data set that has a biasness inherent in it already, and it's funny, I always go back to a sports analogy around biasness. And I grew up in the Pittsburgh area when I was younger, and Barry Bonds was the big player. And he always was very, very frustrated with the media. And the reason being, he'd sit down for a 15-minute interview, and they would only capture 30 seconds of his clip. And that 30 seconds was probably the most deeming things that he said or around something. And he got so frustrated that he stopped talking to the media for a period of time. It's the same, that's biasness. That's the same thing that can happen with data. We can have huge, large sets of data, And when we only train it on a subsection of that data, you're going to have biasness introduced into your data. That could be on purpose, or it could be just something people forgot to do as part of their overall training of the model. Those are the big areas that organizations are struggling with today. And as where we're going to eventually get to is we're talking a lot about ChatGPT, OpenAI. These are public models. We're going to be going now into the public architect, I'm sorry, the private architecture, the private models, where organizations are going to have more control of their own data sets and their own algorithms and their own training of their own models as well. Shobhit?
I'm 100% with both of you on this. And this is one of those areas where, just being an IBMer, I'm extremely proud of the stance we've taken on data provenance, ethics around AI. We have historically, for the last few decades, had a very huge emphasis on building trust in AI. If you think about the principles that we're going to follow, the purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence, not replace it. Data and the insights should always belong to the creator, and technology needs to be transparent and explainable. Across each of those principles, that breaks down into explainability, fairness, robustness, transparency, and privacy of all of your data. The good news is, over time, every large AI vendor has had a huge focus on creating the right tools to help humans monitor and moderate and govern these AI models. I'm particularly proud about the work that we've done in our IBM company to look for provenance, clean data, and be able to train these models with high accuracy. So the examples that you raised so far, the data that the model was trained on could be biased. For example, if you look at application approval processes for a credit card company, if you look at historical data that went into training it, you will see certain genders, ethnicities, age groups that will be biased, right? Because they just did not get approved by humans if you go back 50, 100 years, right? If you use that data to train the AI models, you're obviously transferring historical bias into the new model. So there's no way for us to prevent that human bias getting transferred over into an AI. So now we have a ton of tools that look at the data that is being trained on. There are ways of detecting bias. There are ways of testing out those models before you start putting them into production. In generative AI specifically, the massive, insanely large models that were built, they're absolutely in a class of their own. The capabilities that these models are showing us today in production with our clients, I just fall off my chair multiple times a day. These are absolutely stunning models. But when you start looking at the data that they were trained on, that data may have the copyright issues. They may have issues with the hate, bias, and ethnicities that they got pulled into, right? So within IBM, we have created a lot of tooling to take that model inside an enterprise, take all of the data and cleanse it, remove everything that is hate, bias, or copyright infringed in the data itself. Then we retrain the models for our large banks, telcos, healthcare clients, and then we deploy that into their environment. So that model that has been deployed now is free of bias and other issues, and we can all stand behind it, that we can exactly drive the provenance of what the data was used to drive this. So there's been a lot of progress. I'm genuinely very excited about the community of AI, how much we have done to get to a point where tools are available to help humans remove bias. One of the things that humans have to do a lot is just training these models, right? So for example, when GPT-4 model was trained, it would go ingest the world's information and then come back and we would say, I'll ask you a question. And based on the answer that you give me, I'm going to either reward you or I'm going to penalize you. That's exactly how I'm teaching my 7-year-old daughter, right? I tell her to read something, come back, and we quiz through it, and she learns how to learn. So these models are learning how to learn with humans telling them what to do. That particular step is very tedious. Nobody wants to read the whole Charles Dickens or Shakespeare and verify that the summary was accurate, right? In those areas, we have AI that's helping us help AI be better. So we've evolved as a community to a point where the tools and the AI that's available to then govern and monitor AI it's a two-way street, and we're getting even better at trying to monitor these. Now, unfortunately, there is no great way to monitor every output that's been generated. ChatGPT as a company made a decision to open up their AI to the world to crowdsource and try to figure out how people are using this. And they started to get new novel ways in which people are trying to trick the system. So every new iteration of the AI that's coming out is a bit more safe. It's a bit more secure. There are all sorts of layers on top to moderate both the input and the output. So that way, when enterprises are using it, A, they have data provenance. B, every answer it's generating has to have lineage back to where it came from. And C, once it starts generating things in production, we have better tools and better AI that helps us monitor that. So I think those three things have helped our enterprises deploy these securely at scale.
Great. It's a fascinating topic and good subject we were just talking about. But I want to take this in a little different direction and hit a topic that I think a lot of people on this call would be interested in. And it's sort of getting back to basics. And it's, if you're a small business owner or a mid-sized company, where do you start with all this? How do you start using AI for your business? What's the first things you need to do? Doug, can you start with that? And who do you go to for advice?
Sure, happy to. So one of the things that, first of all, that as you look at any of the introduction of any new digital technology, AI, intelligent automation, others, make sure you understand your overall business processes. So trying to automate or bring in data sets that are not trusted or not proven, not documented, not understood, that could be a recipe for disaster. And a lot of times what we'll see is organizations dabble into these new technologies. They struggle because the business process wasn't accurate, the data wasn't accurate or clean. And what do they say? The technology doesn't work. We've tried that, it doesn't work. That's going to fail every time. Making sure that you have good fundamental foundation of good data governance, stewardship, good practices around your overall ETL, integrations of your data. These are all table stakes, but they have to be done well when you start thinking about inside your own firewall, inside of your own data, to be able to generate more and more insights. And one of the questions that was in the chat a little bit ago was around how do we make better business decisions? And this is where everyone is trying to get towards with leveraging artificial intelligence as well as advanced reporting and others. And one of the big reasons why folks are gravitating towards AI is because it can analyze vast amounts of data very, very quickly and look at insights that a human is typically not going to pick up as part of their everyday routine. They may eventually see some trends over time, but AI can see that in very, very, very quickly. Leveraging data science, they can help ask the right questions to build the right algorithms to help drive that. So coming back to how do you get started? First of all, the business process I've talked about before. The other one is experiment. Start small. Start thinking about what are the business processes? What are the decisions? What's the data sets that I want to be able to go after? Start to build your fundamentals there, and then start to experiment, scale that experiment, lather, rinse, repeat, and continue to do that. Deploy that into your production, learn from what you've produced, and then go do that again. From a small business size, that's an optimal way of really driving production and driving transformational value into your business by utilizing an agile process to learn from your mistakes and do it again, other processes over and over again as well.
And I know in IBM or CGI, they're probably spending a nice amount, but if you're to implement AI strategies or help companies implement AI strategies, if you're a small business owner, can you do this on the cheap? I mean, is there other ways to get into AI without
I'll take the first stab and then I'll let Shobhit answer both questions.
Yeah,
together.
yes.
The best consulting answer is it depends, right? And the reason being because it depends on scope. It really does. A lot of organizations we go into, they'll ask us what one business problem, one business processes, and that'll be the scope. And other organizations, they want to set a full enterprise AI strategy, including governance and integration, data quality, building models, data science. So there's not a one size fits all answer, but the answer yes, you can enter into this marketplace not having to break the bank, because you can start small. That's why when you asked me for my recommendation, it was start small, experiment, and scale. And when you follow that process, your entry, your toll gate coming into there is not going to be as financially strapped if you come in with a total end-to-end enterprise strategy. But Shobhit?
I think the fact that the cost to deploy AI with these generative models has plummeted. It used to take a lot of effort, data scientists creating AI models for each specific task. That cost was very high. We've now in an era where, because these models are already pre-trained and people have made variations of it, for a small business, it's an ideal place in time to deploy AI in their organization. If you look at specific workloads that a small business has to do, and I'm a small business owner myself, and so is my wife, we have multiple tasks that we have to take care of. And for each of your workflows, you figure out what's the right set of available tools where you're paying $10 a month or $100 a month to get access to a service that does a lot of the workloads for you. So over time, we have swung the pendulum from having to invest a lot to get access to AI to what Doug said earlier, access to AI has plummeted. So being in a small business, if you need to generate an email, if you need to understand regulations, if you're trying to optimize some process, some task, there are just a ton of tools available that you can start experimenting with. So because all these tools are getting more and more accessible, the price point to deploy AI, and to Doug's point, to experiment with AI in small steps is just a lot easier today than it was a few years back. If you're creating, if you're looking at any of the big cloud vendors that you work with, if you have ads on Google, for example, Google itself has evolved its ad platform to leverage all the generative AI capabilities that they've brought to market. So you can easily create an ad with an image of a cat sitting in front of a plant, and that becomes your Google ad that goes on the right side, can be hyper-personalized, things of that nature. Earlier, you would have to actually engage with the photographer to run a campaign, to create the marketing content, and then go create that. And that's something that, honestly, the small businesses don't have the budgets to do. But now with generative AI, you're able to localize and create content at a much faster pace at a fraction of the cost. So in my business itself, we're trying to figure out every step along the way that we do, how do we optimize that to do more with less? And that's just the theme of 2023, very productivity driven. The marketplace is getting increasingly very competitive. So you have to stand out. You can't have a static website. You can't have people reach out to you and not get back to them over social media. All of that is being augmented by AI. So AI becomes a good co-pilot for the businesses to run.
And just real quickly,
go ahead. Yeah.
sorry, I was just going to ask, what areas of the company are most like small businesses or starting in when it comes to AI? Is it customer service? Is it marketing, writing marketing copy, and then we'll go into how this is impacting jobs? And
sure, I'll start and I'll pass it on to you, Doug and Kevin. Let me just take a step back. Generative AI specifically, there are three capabilities that we are seeing that are very impactful for small businesses. The first one is its ability to summarize content. If you have to research, if you have lots of documents, say you have a contract, an invoice comes in, you want to pull out the invoice elements and you want to compare it against the contract, are you getting the right discount? Right? So anything where we are extracting information or summarizing it in a few bullet points, right? That is a really good capability of understanding unstructured content, text, and stuff like that. The second one is having a conversation against a body of knowledge. If you have a lot of enterprise data, have a lot of documents all over the place, it's messy. You can actually have a conversation securely against those documents. And then the third area is around creating net new content, whether that's an email, marketing copy, or persona, or creating data to train models, or things of that nature, right? Anything where I'm responding back to an email from a customer, that email response can be auto-generated based on the context of what was said, what tone you want to introduce into your responses, things of that nature. So across all of these three capabilities, there are lots of workflows in a small business that get impacted. So marketing, campaigns, end-to-end. being able to run a supply chain or your accounting and those use cases that require you to read a lot of data sets and stuff, or read a lot of content. Those are getting impacted very quickly with generative AI. So as you start to look at 2023 being a very productivity-driven year, most of the use cases are more internal facing towards an employee. Most of our clients, small businesses and large enterprises, they want to have a human in the loop to be getting the output. To Kevin's point earlier, you need to make sure that the answers that are being generated are reviewed by somebody. We have a human process in the loop, and those internal facing productivity-driven use cases are driving 2023 projects that we're doing for the clients right now. Doug, is that something similar you're seeing too?
Absolutely. And the human in the loop that Shobhit just talked about is so important, because this is where we have the opportunity to put the guardrails in many ways, is when you trust generative AI or AI and automation together to just drive a business, that's where the risk can come into your organization. But when you continue to have human in the loop, the human is able to then synthesize those, quickly synthesize the results. Are they accurate? Being able to ensure the data was of quality and so on and so forth. We want to make sure that we have that human touch throughout that overall process. Clearly, we want to take advantage of what AI and automation brings to us. So being able to have human in a loop ensures that we're doing that in that fairness and the bias and eliminating as much as we can as we build the models and execute on those models to relearn and reteach. But other areas of organization, especially in the small business that we're starting to see, is around that personalization and intimate customer experience. Call centers are a great example of where you can leverage AI automation to help transform that overall process. It's very rich. There's a lot of data about customers. There's a lot of process and workflows that goes in. You can really drive more personalized this experience.
There it goes. So many interesting things. And one of the themes I noticed kind of across much of what I've heard described is, using these tools to streamline, improve, or gain efficiencies in operations. In other words, what you're currently doing now. What can be done better? What can be done cheaper, faster, and so on. Of course. And all I'd like to do to kind of even push us a little further on the possibilities, right? Business isn't strictly focusing on operations, right? It's also thinking prospectively. How can it deliver new services and products that create value for others, that drive the organization forward, right? The whole question of how to innovate is interesting, right? And these tools, from my reckoning, at least at this stage, have this interesting ability to kind of teach us about different domains and all kinds of different technological tools that are out there, explain things in very high level language and go deeper if we want. The innovation process itself is often about combining. It's about taking ideas that are at work in another space and bringing it into your domain, that kind of thing. Bringing two things together and juxtaposing them in ways that have never been done before. It's just interesting. One of the things I ask my students in my innovation class to do is go out and find 2 or 3 technologies that intrigue you, get very high level descriptions of them from ChatGPT, then go a layer in deeper, and then ask, are there interesting ways you can combine them and accomplish something that you haven't done before in a domain? And so what I'd like to kind of just throw out by way of a very open-ended suggestion is this tool has capacities to augment our abilities to brainstorm, because brainstorm is about taking ideas often from disparate spaces and bringing them together in interesting ways. And it can help us do that.
So Kevin, you work at a college and university, and all we keep hearing about is how AI is going to transform the workplace, and it may be vastly different, the workplace 10, 15 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now. So how is our colleges and universities preparing the future workforce for a world of AI, or are they not properly preparing?
Well, those are fundamental questions. And we're asking those questions right now and bringing guests to campus to talk about these sorts of things and bringing our faculty together to reflect on it. I think step one is to embrace the tool rather than, deem it a threat. Students now, of course, have this temptation to rely on it for papers, right? And so, higher ed, of course, is first wondering, not to mention other, educational pathways and levels. They're all worried about plagiarism in the first instance. But when you get back past those initial questions, the real interesting higher ed questions is, how can this make us better? So we're thinking about that. Can it make us better teachers? Can it help students get individualized responses to questions? Is this immensely powerful study tool? But in terms of the workforce and training or educating students for a different workplace, a lot of these things we've talked about. How do you work with a tool and become a good user of the tool, to use it in a way that creates value without being so deferential that it creates problems in its own respect? How do you frame queries that are helpful? How do you become an intelligent consumer of the answers you get and use them valuably, but also critically, so you can go deeper? How can you use these tools to augment your thinking, to use Shobhit's earlier very helpful paradigm, rather than to supplant your thinking, right? We want to be better for the tools, not worse, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with embracing the tools and finding ways to use them in a way that creates value rather than, a whole host of new problems.
So Doug and Shobhit, the world 5 years from now, 10 years from now, should companies be looking at who they hire and what the skill sets that, and are you already changing the skill sets that you're looking at for employees because of AI?
Yes.
What's going on there?
So IBM is a massive company, 300,000 people. So we have to be very conscious about staying ahead of the demand curve from our clients. So when small and large enterprises and federal governments and others interact with us, we need to have the skills that they need to go reduce the time to value, right? That's our positioning in the market. So for the 150,000 consultants, we need to retrain our own population on new skills that are needed in the marketplace. And it's a constant swing, right? There are certain skills that will start being required less of, and there's certain new skills that we need to train up on. So internally, we have a whole curriculum on how do you upskill, reskill people so that they're doing more meaningful work. A human leveraging AI as a co-pilot is going to outperform another human that's not, right? That's just a fact. So in that context, each one of us is looking at what do we do day to day in our workflows. So say I'm running a finance accounting for a large organization. I get an invoice, I compare it with a contract, I create a report, I send it forward, I make sure that it's validated. That's a very manual reading content kind of work. That is going to get transformed faster with generative AI versus, say, a creative who's trying to brainstorm and create a new campaign for a particular company. That still requires a lot more creativity. You're getting augmented with these models right now, but you have to figure out how much of it is mechanical work versus how much of it is creative work that needs knowledge, expertise in a particular domain. You still can't get a large GPT model to go behave like a legal lawyer who has been working at this for the last 2 decades. That level of expertise, domain expertise, is still very, very valuable. But if you're looking at somebody who is just comparing two documents and seeing if they are the same or not, those kind of workflows will obviously get impacted a lot more. So internally within IBM, we've had to look at every persona, every job role that we provide, and look at how that gets impacted with generative AI in the next few years. And we are reassessing how do we change our learning curriculums, what new tools would be needed. What Kevin said earlier, things like creating the right prompt, testing it out with multiple models, how do you do this securely, how do you make these AI models work for your particular domain? Those are net new skills where we have had to go build a lot of tooling to help our own team members. Last month, we announced, we launched 1,000 people, subject matter experts in generative AI. That team is focused on staying ahead in terms of skills across all the different cloud players, all the different ecosystem partners that we work with. And those 1,000 people are driving productivity across the entire organization. Erwin, our CEO, made a statement around how much improvement we see with productivity, and that changes the way we think about our future. I believe more and more of the workloads will start moving towards being augmented significantly with AI. Today, we're in a world where we have these massive large models like GPT-4 that are just absolutely stunning, beautiful class of themselves. But over the next few years, to your question, Kevin, we see that there'll be more purpose-built models that are lower cost point. So the cost of deploying AI is going to further plummet, and be a lot more tailored to legal contracts in healthcare are different from legal contracts in a mortgage company. So we'll see that these large language models start to distill down to smaller models, lower cost to run, and you would see every workflow being augmented with these medium-sized models that are purpose-built, that have the right data lineage and have the right controls in place to ensure enterprise and small business can adopt them securely.
Yeah, and Kevin, just to add to that, if I put myself in the shoes of the small businesses today across New Jersey, and yes, I still need that discipline, or if it's a nurse, a lawyer, a doctor, business major, political science, whatever I'm looking for, I'm still going to need those special skill sets that they're learning in the universities today. But there is going to be that next factor of, as Shobhit talked about, we're going to have more and more worker assist through AI, through technology, that's going to make their jobs easier to work with. What's going to be important is those skills around critical and analytical thinking. That's going to be so important, that everyone has that ability to have that critical thinking. Technology literacy, and I'll take that a step further, data literacy is going to be so important. Right now, how are we going to interact with these tools if you're not familiar with the data sets, the technology? I'm not saying be a developer, of course, but you need to have that sort of technology literacy of what is out there, how are things working together, and how is that then transforming organizations? And then what makes humans special is empathy. So that skill set, and I know it's not something that's necessarily learned, but it's something that over time you develop, is that empathy and active listening. Those are the skill sets that I see organizations in New Jersey going to be looking for. The degrees of the table stakes, I hate to say it that way, because yes, you're going to have those, otherwise you're not going to be considered, they're not going to make that short list. But those differentiating skills are clinical thinking, analytical thinking, technology literacy, empathy, active listening. Those are where that differentiation of candidates are what folks are going to be looking for.
Yeah, we are quickly running out of time, and there's one area that people keep texting me about, and in the chat is, well, number one is security, and how do you, the data's out there, and what do we have to worry about AI? And then secondly, Congress and different governing bodies now want to look at AI because all of a sudden it's such a topic that's all over the news. There's a lot of talk about regulation. So is there any way in do a lightning round, and you guys real quickly, we could probably do a second webinar on what the concern is about security and why government wants to regulate.
So Kevin, I'll just 30-second answer. I posted some links on the chat where IBM's Chief Privacy and Trust Officer gave our testimony on what our stance is with Sam Altman, who is the founder of OpenAI. I just pasted those links that has her verbal testimony as well as the written testimony from all three of them. That'll be a quick read for somebody to go look at.
Right.
Doug and Kevin, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the Future of Humanity Institute, the Future of Life, there's a couple of them, one in England and one in the United States, but the American version, put out that letter, that open letter, calling for a 6-month moratorium on AI because it sees it as it's a steep threat. I think what's evolving, and 30 some odd thousand people apparently signed this letter and so on. I think what that's done is it's kind of begun to drive the dialogue about regulatory responses. Really, there's no area that seems to be beyond the sweep in terms of concerns, from copyright and intellectual property, privacy, to use of data that maybe you don't have intellectual property protection in, but was posted in one context and now might be appearing in the results of these searches. There's also the threat that we've heard for quite some time and increasingly now of AI suddenly becoming kind of goal-oriented. Can it? We've heard stories about bots engaging in interesting behavior where they're asked to do X and they engage in curious intermediate steps to accomplish X that begin to feel very powerful and unnerving. So these are questions I think we need to explore. I think we need to be open-minded to the fact that the industry might very well benefit from oversight because bad actors or those with malintent have tools that are so powerful now that we need to be mindful of what they can and can't do. But these are deep questions that would require hours to explore. The regulatory challenge is always the same. How can we ensure we get the benefits of this and minimize the downside? And that's, of course, a huge regulatory challenge to try to manage.
And I also think it's important that we don't broad brush AI, because a lot of what we're talking today is generative AI. It's what's the ChatGPT, these public models. Whereas AI has been being utilized in enterprises and organizations for years. And we need to continue to leverage the power of AI and being able to look at data and synthesize data, use an algorithm, everything that we want to do to drive better insights into our business. And that can be done in a very private, ethical manner inside your firewall every day in every organization. From a regulation perspective, we have to try to avoid stifling innovation. That's the biggest scare that we have. Is this is rapidly changing. As we've been talking today, we probably have 10 more large language models, 5 more companies that come online that is driving AI. We got to worry about stifling innovation, but regulation can support the fairness, the transparency that was talked about today. So there's got to be a nice balance between the two.
Okay, great. We're going to wrap it up now. We could probably have a part 2 because there's a lot of questions we did not get to. I just want to real quickly before I turn this back over to Tom Brackett, because we want to be respectful of everybody's time. Just want to thank Kelly Watson from IBM, board member of the Chamber, for providing Shobhit, and Mike Regan, CGI. He connected us with Doug, and Kate Foster from TCNJ connected us with Kevin. So with that, thank you, and I will turn it back over to Tom Bracken to wrap us up.
Thanks, Kevin. And Doug, Kevin, and Shobhit, thank you very much for a fascinating discussion and what I would say for many of us a primer into artificial intelligence. And I think the one statement that made a lot of sense to me, and the comment made, was the need to embrace AI. It's not going away. It's going to grow. We need to get educated. So I think we have to all embrace it and move forward with it. And if we do, there can be a bright future for all of us utilizing AI. So again, thank you to our sponsor, NJM Insurance Group. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Doug, Kevin, and Shobhit. And we will talk to you next time with our next version of webinar with the support of NJM Insurance Group. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks for having us.